Silith Zelori felt the vibration through her lowermost tarsal claw before the warning chimes even began to hum. Declan stood 3 paces behind her on the primary silk span, his breathing a steady, rhythmic counterpoint to the frantic, high-frequency shivering of the canyon's data streams. She adjusted her weight, her 8 limbs finding purchase on the shimmering threads as the air turned cold. He belonged to her. The universe simply hadn't accepted it yet, but the weight of his life woven into her own web was the only truth she required to govern the Zelurian systems. "Stay behind the primary anchor, Declan," Silith murmured, her voice clicking with a resonance that only he could interpret as affection. She moved her upper manipulators with fluid, arachnid grace, weaving a quick reinforcement of triple-strand silk beneath his boots. The human weight was a heavy thing for a world built of data and light, but she had spent cycles ensuring the loom would never let him fall. Across the reality loom sanctum, the High Weaver Caliph watched with a series of judgmental twitches in her secondary eyes. Calitha's own consort was a massive, chitinous warrior of the deep hives, a creature of many blades and 0 vulnerabilities. She did not hide her disdain for Silitha's attachment to a being with only 4 limbs and skin as fragile as unspun silk. "She wove a human into the great loom," Calith whispered, her voice carrying through the vibrating threads for all the gathered authority to hear. "One tug and the whole thing unravels. It is a pity to see an archweavess choose a pet that requires constant stabilization just to stand in our presence." Silith did not offer a verbal defense. She simply went still, all 8 of her limbs locking into a posture of delicate ferocity that caused the threads around her to glow a dangerous, violent violet. She watched the horizon of the canyon, where the colors of reality were beginning to bleach into a sickening, static-filled gray. The judgment of her peers was a phantom thread, easily severed, but the approaching void was a different matter entirely. The air didn't just move, it tore. A reality shredder manifested at the edge of the sanctum, its formless mass eating the very distance between them. It consumed the woven data of the canyon, turning solid architecture into a formless slurry of non-existence. The other Zelurian authorities recoiled, their limbs scrambling for the safety of the deeper webs as the shredder's presence began to unravel the physical space of the sanctum. Panic was a high-pitched frequency that Silith ignored. She felt the thread between her wrist and Declan's hum with a sudden, sharp intensity. He wasn't retreating. He was stepping past her, his boots thudding softly on the reinforced silk. "Don't move," Declan said. His voice was a flat, terrifying calm that cut through the sound of the world ending. "I need 3 seconds." Silith felt a surge of possessive pride. She did not grab him or pull him back to the safety of her shadow. She stood her ground as the reality shredder lunged, its maw a vortex of unmaking that promised to erase them both from the collective memory of the species. Declan's hand didn't go for a weapon. He simply reached into the air and seemed to catch a handful of nothing. A shimmering, translucent sphere erupted from his palm, expanding with a sharp, crystalline ring until it encased the shredder and the immediate platform in a 10-meter bubble of distorted light. Inside that sphere, the chaos of the unraveling universe came to a screeching, impossible halt. If time could be locally suspended, all molecular motion within the field would halt. Thermal energy drops to 0. Chemical bonds freeze mid-reaction. A blade passing through a time-frozen object would meet 0 resistance. The molecules cannot redistribute force. It would be like cutting through a hologram. The shredder was no longer a predator. It was a statue of static. 1 second passed. Silith watched with a cold, predatory hunger. She did not blink as Declan stepped into the frozen zone. His movements were fluid, unaffected by the temporal anchor he had dropped. 2 seconds passed. He reached into the very heart of the entity, his fingers closing around the core thread that anchored its existence to their reality. With a casual, brutal twist of his wrist, he severed it. 3 seconds passed. The bubble popped. The reality shredder didn't just die. It vanished. It ceased to have ever been. The screaming frequencies of the canyon fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. The bleach-gray stain on reality snapped back into the vibrant, woven colors of the sanctum. Declan exhaled, the sound loud in the sudden vacuum of the aftermath. He turned his back on the empty space where a god-eater had stood and walked back to Silith. He didn't check for injuries. He didn't look at the other Zellurians who were currently frozen in a different kind of paralysis. The absolute crushing shock of witnesses who had just seen a pet delete a catastrophe. The shredder could erase stars. Declan erased the shredder. In 3 seconds, Silith thought, a ripple of dark, inner amusement crossing her senses. She watched Caliph, whose multiple limbs were trembling so violently they were sending erratic data pulses through the entire web. The High Weaver's chitinous consort looked like a child's toy in comparison to the human now resuming his place at Silith's shoulder. He reached out, his warm, blunt fingers brushing against the silk thread at her wrist. It was a small, quiet gesture, a resumption of the bond. Silith felt the collective memory of her people shifting. They looked at the human and no longer saw a weakness to be pitted, but a predator that allowed itself to be kept. They saw the truth she had always known.